What's going on, guys? This is Dan Watson, learningcameras.com, and I've got the NX1 here for Samsung, and on paper, it's really hard to argue with the NX1. I mean, you've got a 28 megapixel APS-C sensor, 15 frames a second, 4K video, 205 AF points. It really looks like a camera begging for attention, but Samsung is new to this market segment, and so there's plenty of room for skepticism. So for the past month, I've been putting this camera to the test to see if we can really deliver on that spec sheet and an asking price of $1,500. Now, I do want to preface this quickly, as Samsung has issued one update which I am using, and they've announced a second update which will boost a dramatic increase in performance as well as certain abilities that are not available at this time. So I just want to preface that. And, I'm commenting on what I'm able to use at the time of this review. I will be updating this information with new stuff on the website, learningcameras.com, so you can hit me up there, as well as even in the comment section and on this video. So stay tuned and we'll see what else is going to be coming. But Samsung is updating things on these cameras. So I'm going to tell you what I know from now, and you can keep up with me for any updates on that, as well as big sales that I might find. I put those kind of information on there. Using the links when making your purchase really helps us out and keep things going. So a big thanks for you guys who use those. And raw files for this review are also going to be available at learningcameras.com. So check out the website and you'll be able to get all of that information for you to download and play with yourself. Just in case you don't believe me, you'll have all of those images so you can really take a look at this camera and see what it does. So on with that, let's take a look at this review and see what this camera has to offer. Now, when it comes to hardware, the NX1 is actually built quite well. I mean, not only is this thing weather sealed, but it feels sturdy, professional, certainly up to the job of a higher end camera. And it's also very ergonomic, very familiar design, actually a little bit more familiar with Nikon users, because you have this dial up on the top right here that is going to have some of those settings like ISO and white balance and things like that that you might be used to. So for Canon users, it doesn't have those buttons across here, and instead they're moved here and on the back. Now, you do have tons of customization. You have 3 of the 4 buttons on the dial in the back are customizable, as well as a host of other options. Now, you do only get one SD card slot, but Samsung has a host of options for getting your images off the card and onto your phone or tablet without ever taking the card out. You've got NFC, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth options, and they're executed perfectly on the NX1. So it's one of the easiest cameras I have used for transferring your images onto a phone or tablet. Now, we also have a USB 3.0 port, which can also be used to charge the battery, as well as a headphone jack, a microphone, HDMI ports, the latter which can be used for clean video output. So it's awesome to see that. Now, it was interesting as Samsung did not include a standalone charger with the base model body only. However, if you buy it with the package with the lens, it does come with that, as well as a second battery, and I think a battery grip as well. Now, the nice thing, though, is you can just plug in a USB power bank right into the USB, and you can power this thing all day long with something like that, plus it'll charge the battery, so you can really go all day long on that. So, I mean, this thing has all the essentials that you would need for photography and videography use. The articulating touchscreen, it's a nice touch. The screen is very, very sharp. The touch operation is better than really any other touchscreen camera I've ever used. Smooth animations, excellent feedback. So you can clearly see the advantage of using a Samsung as a leading smartphone manufacturer and also a TV manufacturer. I mean, those types of cues are coming into this Samsung NX1, and you're really able to take advantage of some of the technologies that they have pioneered in that. Now, you don't get much movement from the screen, but, it's enough to allow for some basic high and low shots. So, it gets the job done. I would like to have seen a little bit more movement and possibly even be able to rotate the screen like we have on the Canon 70D, but I'll take it. It's a little bit of rotation on that. Now, we do have an electronic viewfinder, and I will say it does have a significant amount of lag for whatever reason above 800 ISO. However, if you're below that, it's pretty good, pretty accurate. I wouldn't say it's the best that I've ever seen, but it's decent and it gets the job done. So you do have a switch to switch between the viewfinder and the screen. I found that it does also have an automatic sensor on here for you when you put your eye up. However, I will say that the sensor is it's kind of a little sensitive when it gets into dark light, but not very sensitive when it gets into daylight. So luckily you have that switch right there to be able to use. And Seems like excellent hardware for $1,500 camera, and all the major controls and ports I need are right there and where I would think they are, so definitely a good job on the hardware. Now when it comes to features, I don't usually talk about this too much, but Samsung is a Samsung camera after all, and so you're going to have plenty of features on a body like this. You're going to find 5-frame bracketing, plenty of shooting modes. You're going to be able to take time-lapse, remote shooting, selfie modes. It'll beep when your face is in focus, automatic baseball shutter. If it detects a bat for a baseball shot, it's going to take a picture. Most of that stuff is going to be unusable, but for most of the stuff, it does work, and it's nice to see some of those features in there, like bracketed shooting and things like that at 5 frames. That's really all I need, so good to see that. Now, unfortunately, remote shooting, if you're looking at doing that, it leaves a lot to be desired, and it seems like instead of using the phone as a remote trigger like we've seen in the GH1, it uses it more like a camera, and basically this is now just the lens and the sensor, and it's almost like all of the operation is going through the camera. So it's going to change up all your modes. The settings are going to be extremely limited. I was very unimpressed, actually. So nothing like what I was used to on the GH4 for remote shooting. So it kind of let me down when it comes to that, which was actually a big surprise. Now, I actually use this feature a lot on the GH4 because it allowed me to remote control a B camera during a wedding if I had one going. And, if you're ever photographing a video yourself, it's nice to be able to do that and be able to do that from your device. So fortunately, everything else worked pretty well. It was just that feature that didn't quite work as advertised. Now, I'll go out on a limb here and say that the NX1 has the best focusing of any camera, mirrorless camera. And that is remarkable. And even while I was shooting high-speed motion, in some ways it was almost better than a DSLR because it was able to track better in between shots than sometimes a DSLR. And even when you're shooting 15 frames a second, it really did an unbelievable job at tracking that motion as it was moving through the frame. Now, face tracking was actually better than even the dual pixel Canon 70D, which I have and use all the time for my videos, so it was nice to see Samsung really step up to the plate when it comes to focusing, and I will say that this is definitely the best I have used in a mirrorless camera. Now, in low light, a DSLR shooting stills has some advantages because of a different type of focusing system, but in almost every other circumstance, the NX1 definitely held its own and was really a joy to use. Gives you plenty of options, focus points, different modes. You can resize them pretty easily. Face detection, some different shooting modes like that. So very, very good, and I must say that overall it has been quite easy to work with. You do have focus peaking if you're using manual mode, which also does work very well, so that's nice to see. Focus peaking, it does have some limitations, but when it comes to the video on some of the stuff you can do. So I made a video for an explanation, so you can hit up that video if you want to really get in-depth on focus peaking. However, the basic focus peaking is there and usable, so that's nice to see. Alright, so let's get into the quality of the camera. We made it to the good stuff. Now, these are my honest opinions, but once again, I invite you to go ahead and download the full resolution of files. They're available on the website. Play with them yourself, edit them, look at the low light results. These are raw files, no processing, nothing like that. Just straight out of the camera, no noise reduction. So you're really going to get a true view of what the camera is. Now, for me, I will say that the NX1 is one of the best APS-C cameras that I have used. And given that it doesn't do anything that is far above any of the other ones, but it holds its own with the best. And I will say it's a little bit good and a little bit bad. Samsung created a new backside illuminated APS-C sensor, which had me hopeful for just a bit more. But, certainly there were no regrets when using the NX1. You get excellent performance, excellent picture quality, 28 megapixels. That's awesome to see. Now, when it gets to low light performance, I would say files were looking excellent up to about 1600 ISO. They were certainly usable up to 6400 ISO in most cases. So, once again, this is about what I've seen from the best APS-C cameras that, like a Nikon D7100. Although it's not quite a new level of performance, taking it to another level. So, however, given that Samsung stuffed 28 megapixels in this camera, it's actually really, really amazing. Now, while the NX1 is very much a still camera, it also has some drool-worthy things for videographers. And one of my favorite things about the NX1 is whether I'm shooting videos or stills, you can always have a great camera. For video quality, it is razor sharp thanks to 4K recording, very realistic colors, overall tones look good. At the time of shooting, there were no profiles like the Cine D on the GH4 recording flat. However, that has been announced. So once again, that is something that will be coming to this camera very, very shortly. So you will be able to shoot in those flat profiles and hopefully get a little bit more dynamic range. Now, overall, I didn't find it any worse than something like the GH4 when you're shooting in the standard mode. However, you don't have any of those abilities right now, but that will be coming depending on when you're watching this. You're also going to get control of the master blacks, luma levels, so tons of control that's coming up. Now, low light performance was also very good, controlled up to 1600 ISO. It would go up to 6400 ISO. It begins to get unusable as you go above that or anything above that. I would say it's about on par with the GH4, but not a whole lot better. So, you're going to get performance like any APS-C camera, just not much better. You do have that jello effect from your rolling shutter. It was very present. And, while I don't notice it a ton in my normal shooting style, there are certain camera movements that you're going to want to avoid. It certainly isn't much worse to me than cameras like the A7S, although, I did have issues with moiré as well. It does show up. And while it's not horribly distracting, you will notice it in normal video recording. So as far as features go, currently I'm unable to change volume levels while recording, but this is also a change that's coming with the new firmware, which brings me to an awesome part of this camera, and that is that it keeps getting better. So while other brands take months or years to bring new features and fix issues, Samsung has been releasing them within weeks of each other, and it certainly shows that they just have a new level of commitment to this camera, as well as from feedback from other photographers and videographers. They're really taking things to the next level. Now, focusing in the video mode on this is actually very good and usable. It is the first camera, other than the Canon 70D and the 70 Mark II with the dual pixel AF, that has actually been usable and reliable for me. And I would say that this is probably even a step better, which I did not expect. Samsung has allowed us to change the speed of focusing for also smooth focus pulls. That's something else that came in the firmware announced later. So again, a lot of these features are coming later into the game, but Samsung is big on making sure that they're there. Now, you do have the nice screen and focus peaking option. So unfortunately, there is no mode dial for video, and that's interesting because you can't actually switch this to a video setting. And that means if you're constantly switching between photos and videos, the downside to that is you are going to be having to change your settings and then come back to the video mode or the photo mode and change your settings back to what you would do for photos. So it's nice to be able to just have a video mode and be able to switch to it, have all your video settings there. You do have 2 custom modes, and you actually have tons more that you can actually program in and recall them to any of these 2 custom modes at any time you want. However, those things aren't saved as you update. So every time you switch back or turn off a camera, it's going to reset those. Now, we do have slow motion control, which is awesome. Technically, you can kind of get up to 120 frames a second, although this processing is done in camera, so you're not actually saving files at 120 frames per second at 1080p. The most you can save at is 60 frames a second, 1080p. However, you can actually save those in half-time slow motion at 60 frames a second, or quarter-time slow motion in 30 frames a second. So you can really customize that, and the nice thing about it doing it in camera is that when you take it into post or just play it back on the camera, you already have that slow motion footage, so it's nice to see. Now, the big elephant in the room here is the H.265 recording. It's some good and some bad things. I found that I could shoot about 3 times more footage than I could on something like a GH4 shooting 4K. So very nice to see that. However, you will need to transcode the files for now. But once again, H.265 is not a proprietary format at all. It will be supported very, very shortly. So I think this is going to be a minor issue. And the strengths are that you get to use your standard Class 10 SD cards. You don't have to buy anything special like a GH4 for shooting that. And also, you're going to get some great quality video, albeit you do have to transcode that for now. But you're going to get to fit a ton of it on this storage space. So, it's a temporary inconvenience with some long-term benefits, so I don't have a problem with it. Now, there also is a new firmware update coming to allow more recording options. So you'll be able to record 4K at 24 frames a second. UHD at 24 and 30, 1080p can go from 24 to 60 frames per second, and once again you can have that in slow motion at halftime if you want to go for the equivalent of 120 frames per second. So, the only major limitation I could find is that we're still limited to 30 minutes of recording. And the only exception to this so far without getting into video cameras is a GH4. So I would love to see this option go away, but for now, it's still there, and all my Canon DSLRs are still there, and the Sony A7S. So it's just something we have to deal with on almost every camera that records video. So, the NX1 is certainly one of the best video cameras around, especially given the $1,500 price. There is nothing better for less, that's for sure. Now, as long as you watch the moire and the rolling shutter, which unfortunately plagues most cameras like this, and I really expect this to be a great camera for filmmakers out there, as well as the average user, and these issues will go unnoticed for almost everyone depending on how you're shooting. So, while no camera is perfect, the NX1 definitely comes very close. In fact, what makes this even more amazing is that it is a near perfect camera for both photographers and videographers alike. So while cameras like the GH4 and A7S have some pretty severe limitations when it comes to photography, the NX1 is really the best all-around camera when it comes to shooting both photos and videos, despite the higher cost. And Canon cameras like the 70D and the Nikon D7100, those are limited in their video abilities. So the NX1 was going to appeal to both videographers and photographers alike. I found that I was almost never limited with this camera, no matter what I was shooting. So this was the camera I picked up the most when I didn't know what I was going to be shooting, and I really just felt like in any circumstance, no matter what, this was going to be the camera. With 28 megapixel stills and 4K video, I was really set no matter what I was going to be shooting. And, the low light performance and everything else is among the best that you can find in APS-C cameras. It's great to see Samsung's attention to detail. You can definitely see the potential of the NX line. In fact, the stumbling block for me in this is not actually the camera itself, but mainly things like lens selection. You're going to be limited to a new line of Samsung lenses. They actually do not have a lot of other cameras that a lot of the other brands do, like Canon and Nikon, and even Sony. So there are no full frame options for this. You can't buy these lenses, and right now you have nothing really good on the market to use as a second body except another NX1. So not as much portability as you would find from Samsung or from Sony, Canon, and Nikon. However, this is kind of like the Panasonic GH4, where any lenses that you buy for that are going to be limited to pretty much that camera, and that's about the only Panasonic lenses I would use, Panasonic camera I would use those lenses for. The nice thing is you can always get an adapter and use Canon lenses, Nikon lenses, Sony lenses, anything like that. It did work perfectly with this. You do get focus peaking, all of those other options. So you do have some options there. I've used it with pretty much all of my Canon lenses as well. So the only downside for me is that it's going to be a brand new system. We don't know the future of Samsung NX cameras. However, this is an unbelievable start, and it's great to see the attention to detail that went on this camera. It's certainly one that I am almost positive that I will be picking up extremely shortly. So thanks to B&H for sending this in. So check out the links at B&H Photo. They've got some great deals on this camera already with some package deals, so you want to check those out. And once again, head to the website. You can check me out on Facebook and Twitter as well. So keep in mind that we're going to have updates for this as it's going along. You can use those links on the website if you're making your purchases, and check out the raw files, and stay tuned for some of the other videos and features that are coming. And it's really an awesome camera, and if you're looking for an all-in-one camera, I would say the NX1 is going to be the way to go.